guys, it's Will. It's Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, welcome. It's nice to see you. I thank you for finding us. If you feel like subscribing, that would be a huge help. Obviously, it's a big boon to the channel. Give us a comment, a thumbs up, and all that fun stuff. What are we here to talk about today? Let's just dive in. It's a Blu-ray review. Hell to the yes. It is the Eureka release of Knockabout, directed by Sammo Hung. This is the first major starring role of Yuen Biao, who you see right here. Sammo Hung is also in the film. And then Beardy Brian Lung is in the film. Lau Kar-wing. I've been on a big Lau Kar-wing kick recently because he's in so many of these Sammo films that Eureka has been putting out. There you have Mars. You'll definitely recognize him as he's one of Jackie Chan's best friends. And he is a first-generation member of the Jackie Chan stunt team and is in tons and tons of Jackie Chan movies and also doubles Jackie Chan in various films, which I learned a lot about from the commentary tracks and things that have been coming out with the Jackie releases from like Eureka in '88 and stuff. And there you have Carl Maka, who has a little comedic cameo in this film that's really fun. So this is the limited to 2000 first run of this film. This movie came out in 1979. It is a martial arts comedy, and it really is a showcase for just the insane physical ability and acrobatics and incredible martial arts talents of Yuen Biao, Lau Kar-wing, Sammo Hung, and then to a lesser extent, Beardy. Beardy is one of actually the main characters. He's very funny in this film. His performance is really strong. He's got a lot of really good physical and athletic ability, but as he says himself in the interviews, and if you know about him, you'll know he's not a martial artist. So he was kind of just learning the moves for the film, and it's very fun to have him in this film, and I really like his partnership with Yuen Biao. But to me, this movie is really a showcase for that guy, and that guy. So I'm going to show off the physical kind of aspects of the release here in just a second, but if you're unfamiliar with the film, just to tell you what it's about, Yuen Biao and the Beardy character are brothers. And they're basically like con men, grifters, whatever you want to call it, and they just kind of like drift through life trying to rip people off. That's kind of what they do. This movie, there's a lot of dark stuff going on in this movie. If you're familiar with Sammo Hung's films, you'll know that he likes really dark movies. He makes very dark movies, I guess I should say more specifically, but he also really likes to entertain the audience. He actually says, there's an interview with him on this disc, and he says that he believes that theater, Peking opera, that kind of stuff is for drama. Films are for entertainment. He's really, really, really an entertainer. And this is a very silly, slapstick, goofy, funny film that is clearly designed to entertain people. But it's about pretty dark stuff. Like, I won't reveal who the villain is because it's kind of a twist, but the villain is basically like a cold-blooded murderer. And the good guys are not really good. Like, they're con men. And then they finally decide they need to train with a master and learn martial arts, not because they want to become better people or they've had this revelation or something, but because they think that would be an easier way to make money. Like, if they're better at beating the crap out of people. Because they keep getting beat up by people. They're like, okay, so we need to learn how to beat people up so that we can better con people out of their money. It's kind of a dark movie, but it's very, very silly. It's not like if you've seen Odd Couple, if you've seen Warriors 2, which are some other recent Sammo films that I actually have those over here, that were released by Eureka. Here's Odd Couple right here. This is one of my favorite films. Like, this is probably actually my favorite release of 2022 so far. What year are we in? I had to think for a second. I also really love the Skinny Tiger Fatty Dragon one, but as far as old school martial arts movies are concerned, I enjoyed the crap out of this movie. This movie gets really bleak and violent and brutal and dark in places. Knockabout does not do that. Even though there's very dark stuff that happens in this movie, there's really only one or two scenes where the tone shifts towards darkness. It's really kind of slapsticky and goofy the whole way through. This movie is also very obviously riding the coattails of the two Jackie Chan movies that came out in 1978, the year before, that were huge hits, which were Snake and Eagle Shadow and obviously Drunken Master. And the Sammo Hung character is kind of reminiscent of the like Drunken Master character in Drunken Master, and you could see Yuen Biao's character in this film is kind of similar to the Jackie character, in that he's kind of charming and young and got this little bowl cut, and he's like handsome and he's kind of like cheeky and arrogant and stuff like that. But whereas in the Jackie movies, he has this big change of heart and becomes a different person in Drunken Master, for instance. In this, they're just like con men who want to con people better. So to show off the physical release too, you have the slipcase, which is designed by Darren Wheeling. And as we can see now, as they're putting out more and more of these films, I'm just trying to see if I have any of the other ones over here. Yeah, see? So the martial arts classics that they've been putting out recently are like a series in that they have, you can line the spines up and see that the artwork is similar. See, so Duel to the Death, One Arm Boxer, there's Knockabout, there's Odd Couple. And so you get that slipcover and then you pop it out, and I didn't even reverse this. It came like this. I really like this artwork. This is really cool. So you get that poster there, and then here's the back with the bonus features listed. And then on the inside here is the disc. There's your booklet. And then if we pop out the disc and the booklet, you get that cover again, which is the slipcase artwork. And then the booklet. So the booklet is by James Oliver, who writes a lot of these booklets. And it's kind of like, it's about Yuen Biao, which is kind of cool, right? Because it's like, we've learned so much about Jackie. We've learned so much about Sammo with all these releases recently. And now Yuen Biao finally gets his due. So it kind of just goes over his career and how his personality is different from Jackie and Sammo's, and how extremely talented he is as like an acrobat. Well, doing the acrobatics, I guess, is a better way to put it, because he's not like a circus acrobat, right? But doing the acrobatics and like his just physical ability is just incredible. Look at this picture and this one. That's pretty amazing. So this is, I enjoyed this booklet. It's like, well, it's the kind of the, it's very much like fan service of like, let's give Yuen Biao his due, and let's talk about his talents and his abilities and his relationships with Jackie and Sammo. There's Jackie with their master, Jim Yuen Biao. And this is from the film here. And I mean, but there are scenes in this movie. Like there's a scene where the Sammo character, so this right here, I'll talk about this more in a minute, but this is from footage that is not in the movie, but that is on this release that they used for promotional material in Japan. Okay, here it is right here. There's stuff that Yuen Biao does in this movie. Oh, and this is actually really cool too. This is an excerpt from the original Golden Harvest Knockabout sales flyer. So that's really cool. And I mean, there's just incredible photos in here. There is stuff that Yuen Biao does with a jump rope while Sammo is training him in this film that is just absolutely insane. Like his physical ability, the shape that he is in, his talent, his like the leaps, the tumbles, the kicks, it's just insane. Like it's astounding to watch. As for, like, I'm not going to really do, like, a full-on review of this film. This is the second time I've seen this movie, but I hadn't seen it since, like, 2009. And all I really remembered about it, maybe it was 2010, maybe in 2010. The only thing I really remembered about it was the Sammo character, who's very kind of distinct. But otherwise, I didn't really remember much about this film at all. My kind of, in a nutshell, if you're someone who hasn't seen this film and you're curious about it, it's very slapstick. That is something that you have to be aware of. Like, this is not one of those films like Odd Couple, like I said, where it's got goofy moments, but it also moves into moments that are really serious, and it's got, like, all the training montages. And, like, there's nonstop fights in this movie, in Knockabout, and there's lots and lots of, like, training and cool martial arts and stuff like that. But the whole movie, like, really with the exception of, like, a couple scenes, is really goofy. Like excessively silly. And I kind of enjoy that stuff. Like it almost reminds me of comedies from like back in the day, like black and white type of comedies like Laurel and Hardy, who you know were like in the Three Stooges. They were big influences on like Jackie and Sammo and stuff like that. Like it's excessively goofy and silly. And it's not like Marx Brothers stuff where it's witty dialogue. Like it's just really goofy slapstick. But in that, you get these fight scenes where you're like, how can someone do that? Like, how is Yuen Biao doing that? How is Sammo doing that? And like Lau Kar-wing, you know, is this incredible martial artist and his fighting ability. There's some really amazing fight scenes in here. Sammo is a great choreographer, obviously, an action director. And so you get amazing physical ability and fight scenes and stuff like that. But this is not a serious movie. This is a very goofy, silly, slapstick film. So I just want to put that out there so people are aware of that. So to review the Blu-ray, this is an incredible release. It looks phenomenal. If you know Times Square Kung Fu on YouTube, he does stuff where he compares like screenshots and footage from different releases over the years. He talks about like the color grading and the image quality and stuff like that. He loves this release. And I know a lot of people go to him to like look at the screenshots and see like what he thinks about like the visual quality of it. I think it looks stunning and fantastic. I think all of these kind of old school martial arts films that have been coming out from Eureka recently look really mind-blowingly incredible. I saw a review of the Duel to the Death release where someone said that they believe that this is the best remaster of an old school martial arts movie they've ever seen. So that's kind of, people out there are saying like these are incredible releases, and then Knockabout is no exception to that. And then you get with the audio, you get the original Cantonese track with the newly translated subtitles, and there's also an English dub. There are two versions of the film on this release. There's I should also say that it's a 2K restoration presented in 1080p with original Cantonese mono audio. There's the original Hong Kong cut, which is an hour and 45 minutes. That's the one I watched without any commentary on it. I just watched to watch the movie and enjoy it. And then I did watch the Frank Cheng and Michael Worth commentary, which is on that longer version. And I watched the Mike and Arna commentary, which is on the shorter export version, which is about 90 minutes long, or like 92 minutes, something like that. So it's about an hour and a half. Then you have an interview with Beardy, an interview with Sammo, an interview with Grandmaster Chan Sao Chang, who is a master of monkey-style kung fu, which is featured in this film. And there's a deleted scene, originally used as teaser footage for the film's Japanese release. So that's the picture that I showed you in the booklet. It's basically like Yuen Biao against a red background doing moves in the way that you would see a lot of these intros to these old-school martial arts movies. And then Sammo comes in and they fight a little bit. It's just kind of a showcase for the styles of the film and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. So, and then there's all the limited edition, like the artwork, the collector's booklet, and all the stuff like that. So, to get into the bonus material, I'll talk about the interviews, I'll talk about the commentary tracks. The Beardy interview is about 7.5 minutes long, and it's, Beardy is such a good interview subject. There's been interviews with him on a lot of these films that have been coming out recently, because he's in a lot of them, like he's in this one, and he was in Warriors 2, and he's just like, he's very laid back. And he loves the fact that he was able to be involved in these films. And he was a big fan of Bruce Lee. And he talks about how he like really wanted to be in movies, and he applied to be in movies, and he did a screen test. And like, he says that his first day on set was the first time he had ever seen a movie camera before. Like, he knew nothing about how movies were made, but he got his shot and he took it. And obviously it was a big success. He talks about working with Chang Che, about working with Lau Kar Lung. One of the things I really liked about his interview is he talks about Sammo's choreography. And he talked about how Sammo would do a lot of moves in one shot. And so you had to have a really good memory to be in these films. And he, as someone who is not a martial artist, it was very hard for him to keep up with, like, obviously he's working with Lau Kar Wing and Yuen Biao. Like, Sammo will be like, do this, 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 and this. They're like, yeah, okay, sure, got it. And he would be like, what, can you do that one more time? Okay. He's very humble, and he's like, he talks a lot about how he's always like, he was always behind everyone else on the set, like trying to keep up and learn. And he said that there were times when he would have to do 30 moves in a single shot, and you would have to memorize the whole sequence as a non-martial artist. That's insane. But he said commonly Sammo would do like 15 to 20 and no fewer than like 10 moves in a single shot. And it was just like a lot of memorization, a lot of like, you had to be very mentally prepared and very physically prepared. And he says that there would be times when he would be like driving home after a day of shooting on a Sammo movie, and his hands would be shaking from like the exhaustion of the intensity of being on the movie sets. But then he also talks about, to him, that's what filmmaking is. And that like now when it's so easy to make movies and people use special effects and in wire work and stunt doubles and stuff like that, he's just, it doesn't feel as genuine to him, like watching the movies or being in them. I thought that was pretty interesting. The Sammo interview is about 7.5 minutes as well. He talks about why Yuen Biao was cast in the film. Sammo was originally supposed to play a different part, and they came up with his part for him and cast someone else in his part, and how that worked, and a lot of interesting stuff about casting, why Lau Kar Wing is in the film and stuff like that. And one thing that Sammo says that I really liked in this interview was he talks about special effects, and he says that special effects are there to help you sell an idea to the audience, but if you can't make the idea happen without the special effects are worthless. And he talks about how like people will go and see American films and be like, the special effects are incredible. He wants people to see his films and be like, I can't believe those people did that. Like, they could actually perform those things. And then you can enhance the performance with the use of special effects. And I think he's talking about like wire work and stuff that they were doing in the 70s, not like CGI stuff, right? But about how he doesn't feel it's cheating to use visual effects to enhance the impact of a film. But if you can't do it, you can't do it. You shouldn't try to fake it with visual effects. And it's interesting, like little insight into his philosophy of filmmaking and stuff like that. And then the interview with the monkey kung fu guy is like 25 minutes. And it is bananas. Like, he talks about the entire history of monkey kung fu, who invented it, why, I guess I should say who developed it. And he talks about like old school martial arts versus like wushu as a more modern thing and what the differences are. He talks about all the sub-styles of monkey kung fu and how they're based on different types of primates and how they fit different types of human physiques. And he talks about monkey kung fu in movies and how it's not really necessarily related to actual monkey kung fu in the moves that you would do if you were a real practitioner. It's just a very, very detailed, thorough examination of this style, which honestly I basically knew nothing about, and now I feel like I know a little bit. Like, it's a really great primer on what monkey kung fu is. So I'm just looking at my notes here. I'm going to talk about the commentary tracks. One other thing I will say before I get into that I wanted to mention is that when you watch this film, and when you watch the other Sammo films that have been coming out recently, like the other ones I was showing off for you, you really do see Sammo's love of characters. And I was thinking about this in relationship to like some other filmmakers, and like if you look at Jackie Chan, right? In a lot of ways, the actors in those movies are just playing themselves, right? Jackie has a tendency, in this is not always the case, but especially like kind of, I would say, Armor of God, even maybe Police Story onward. In a lot of those films, Jackie's just kind of playing himself, and in a lot of them, he's even named Jackie, right? Like in First Strike and stuff like that. Sammo Hung is obviously really invested in creating characters that are unique, that are rich, that have agency, right? In a Jackie movie, you very much have the plot device of there's a bad guy who has a plan, and Jackie Chan is going to go and stop that plan, right? And really, the villain and the hero are the two characters who are shifting the plot and making the story. And in a Sammo movie, every character has an agenda. They have things they want, and they have a backstory, and they have a history, and they have a unique quality to them, and they have unique relationships with all the other characters, and those relationships and those desires are what make the story. It's a very different style of filmmaking, and it's very rooted in character. And I think that's really compelling and really interesting, and makes Sammo a very unique filmmaker. So that was one of my notes that I saw that I wanted to just mention before I forgot. So the Frank and Michael Worth commentary is great. I love these two together. They've done stuff from the Joseph Coe box set, Cinematic Vengeance set that Eureka put out. And they're a great duo because Frank obviously speaks the language, is from Hong Kong. He knows so much about the context of these films, the history of these films. And Michael Worth is a filmmaker, a martial artist, and he has such great insight into the technique of the filmmaking and the martial arts. So them together is like a perfect marriage. In the first like 10 minutes of this movie, Frank explains so many like double entendres in Cantonese that are both spoken and written. And there's so many layers to this film that you would miss as someone who's not a speaker of Cantonese or who can't read Cantonese without Frank as like a guide to walk you through that. And I find that so fascinating. Michael Worth, he talks about like the lenses that Sammo uses, the equipment that he uses, the tripods and things like that, his filmmaking techniques. He talks about the choreography, the timing of it. Like there's a couple scenes where he's like, look at what that guy's doing. Look at what that guy's doing. It's happening simultaneously. There's one scene where I think Beardy and Yuen Biao both get grabbed by 4 different guys and thrown up in the air at the same time. So that's 10 people doing moves simultaneously, and they're not really looking at each other. And so he's talking about how they're probably counting it, and like the timing of that, the coordination of that. It's almost like music, like playing music together, right? It's like really cool to have someone who would have insight into that, talking about that and kind of guiding you through that. They also do a really interesting analysis of the fact that the film is really rooted in the concept of deception, that every character in this movie is deceiving someone somehow, and that's the basis of everything that this movie is about. And it's a really interesting like thematic discussion of that. And then they also talk about the dubbing, which is kind of cool, and how they talk about how Jackie really understood the value of having the same actor dub him every time, because it creates an identifiable voice brand to go along with the image of the actor, and how like Yuen Biao was dubbed by different people in different movies at the beginning of his career. And it's kind of like if you watch these old school Yuen Biao movies, it's kind of like throws you off because it's not the voice you're used to hearing associated with him. And how Sammo would often have like the same dubber and stuff like that, and Karl Maka's dubber, and how the guy who dubbed Karl Maka had an accent. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Karl Maka is actually from the place where that accent is from, and so that became like a trademark of even once the sound. When they started recording the dialogue on set, Karl Maka would keep doing that exaggerated accent because he's actually from that place, or like something like that, if I'm understanding that correctly. So then you have Mike and Arnhem. I love Mike and Arnhem. They're so funny. The first thing that blew me away about this commentary track is, so Peter Chan is in this movie, and I believe he's also in Odd Couple. And Mike Leader dated his niece. So you're watching the movie, and here's this guy who's in the film, and he's like, oh yeah, I knew that guy pretty well. I dated his niece. It's like, what? It's like, you know, it's just like the stories that he has about knowing these people. Like, he's met Lau Kar-leung a bunch of times, and, you know, who's Lau Kar-leung's brother, obviously, and he met Gordon Liu a bunch of times, who's so heavily associated with Lau Kar-leung and Lau Kar-leung. He was like a close friend of the family, and he knew Lau Kar-leung, and just like these stories that he tells about meeting these people and like their actual physical abilities, their martial arts abilities, how like being in their presence, you could like feel that power and stuff. It's just so cool. They talk about the Jackie Chan stuff, as they do in Odd Couple as well. Those films both came out. Odd Couple and Knockabout, if I'm not mistaken, are both 1979. And so these films both came out post Jackie blowing up with the Kung Fu comedy. And so they talk about how those films fit in kind of the continuum of Kung Fu comedy and stuff like that. They talk about Anthony Wong. I didn't know that Anthony Wong is like a big time practitioner of monkey Kung Fu, like in real life. And he basically never does Kung Fu in movies, except for he's in like an Ip Man movie. But he basically never does martial arts in movies, but he's apparently like really big into monkey kung fu, and like would like he would practice with people on the sets of his films and stuff like that, but he doesn't actually do it in movies. I had no idea. I thought that was really fascinating. And they talk about like what's it like being on the set of the films in Hong Kong, because like no one really has like a totally set, clear, defined role, because they didn't have unions. So like in the US, right, with the unions and on film sets, like you can't do certain things as a certain position. Like if you're a lighting person and they're trying to move a set and they're like, hey, can you help me? You're not supposed to, because you're in a different union and the insurance is different and all this stuff, right? Whereas in Hong Kong, it just seems like it's more like a theater trooper. It's like being in a band. Everyone is there because they want to be there and they want to help, and everyone just pitches in and gets it done. It just sounds really fun. So it's really cool to hear that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty good overview of this release. I mean, it looks fantastic. It's a super fun movie. It's a historically important film for no other reason than the fact that it's the first starring role for Yuen Biao. It's an early Sammo Hung directorial effort, really fantastic choreography and fighting. I love Lau Kar-leung. Like, having watched a bunch of these movies he's in recently, I'm like really loving watching him as a performer. Mars is in it. It gets a great fight scene with Lau Kar-leung. Like I said, you get Beardy, you get Karl Maka. It's Eureka Entertainment. It is the Blu-ray release of Knockabout. My name is Will, Sammo Hung Cinema Appreciation Society. I thank you so much for watching as always, and we will see you next time.